Hey, Shay, I really appreciate you coming in tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit about being a priest and a moral leader in today's culture, and I couldn't think of a better guy to do it. I mean, you and I have had a lot of adventures together, and I've seen you be the priest in so many different areas. So I'm so excited that you're here. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I always love spending time with Dean.
You got it. So one of the key things to be a priest is you can't give away something you don't have. So a priest has to know God and savor his glory. So how have you done that in your life?
It started with having a godly father and a godly mother and seeing that modeled in our family's lives. So
tell me about that. Tell me about your dad as the priest then.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember, I had a paper route as a kid, and so I'd be up 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning,
you were happy to get up at that time.
I loved it, especially in the winter. But I'd get up, and my dad he'd be in the Word, and I'd see him drinking his coffee, and he was poured into the Word. And
did he have a spot he always went to, or
he had a little prayer closet? I mean, it kind of varied, right? We had different homes that we lived in, but he was consistent, and I saw a man pursue a relationship with the Lord that was real. It was authentic, and he lived it. He lived it in how he treated people. So I think it begins, there in my life, and so as I grew up and became a young man and started to pursue faith from the standpoint of whether it was as a single man, whether it was as a married man, it was making that dedication in the morning to spend time with the Lord, to get on my knees, to read the Word, and pursue a relationship with Him. Because there's just no other way. The small groups and going to church, those things are excellent, but I think to really get to know the Lord, you need to spend time with Him in the Word, in prayer, meditating in the morning.
If Satan can't steal our witness, he'll try to keep us busy and distract us. So as life has gotten busy for you, as a businessman, as a coach, as a father, as a husband, how have you kept to those disciplines? Because I'm sure it had to be hard to constantly, keep that time sacred.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy.
Okay, that's a better line than what I had.
And I've experienced that. So, for me, it's a matter of commitment. I do find that if I don't get in the Word in the morning right away, things will take over my day. And so it's the discipline of getting to bed on time so that you can get up early, so that you can get on your knees and spend time in the Word before all the other disruptions that are part of your everyday start to take over. And if you, it's just like anything. If you want to be excellent on the field, if you want to be excellent in the boardroom, on the sales call, you prepare for those moments. And it's the same way as a moral leader. Whether you're leading in your home, whether you're leading in your workplace, you have to be prepared for those opportunities to share the gospel and stand for truth. And it starts in the morning, getting up early and spending that dedicated time with God.
Well, I love the fact that your dad, RL, would, model that for you. So how did you see that play out in his life? You said you saw his time in the Word. You could see how that was something that played out in all the different places, in all of his personal mission field. You could see him being a priest because of his time in the Word.
My dad was the same guy everywhere, right? And that's when I said it. His faith is authentic, whether he was leading at home, whether it was coming in and ejecting an inappropriate movie that he felt wasn't up to the standard that he wanted his family to live to.
Much to the happiness of his son at that point.
Yeah, not the older son.
Yeah.
Hope in case Kevin's watching, I hope he doesn't hear that. But no, he was the same way at work. He was the same way in the neighborhood. I mean, he was kind of the guy when something happened that would be at the neighbor's door, offering to help, offering to pray for them. He just lived it out consistently. And as a coach, he was my soccer coach for years. He coached every one of his kids. He had 4 kids, coached every one of them. And every time there would be conflict, there'd be parents that had certain expectations, or there'd be issues that would arise at out-of-town tournaments. And every time, my dad was consistent, and he developed a reputation amongst the players and the parents as kind of being that Bible-beaten, dad or that Bible-beaten coach. So what I saw was a man who had an authentic love for the Lord and lived it out everywhere and wasn't worried about the consequences of doing that. I think the tendency, especially in our culture today, is to fear man more than we fear God. And my dad showed me how the fear of God should always trump the fear of man. Consistent.
One of the key things we focus on in Men of the Kingdom is trying to get that eternal mindset, that mind of Christ. And you gain that by asking questions like, who's your audience in life? And if your audience is man, you're going to play to the expectations of man. But if your audience is God, you got to know God to understand His voice. So I've seen you do that also in the workplace. So, one of the challenges right now in our culture to be a priest is to authentically live that out in today's corporate culture.
Really hard.
Yeah, so how have you seen, or where have you seen moral leadership, specifically from being a priest out in the corporate culture?
I think it's rare. A lot of people are, again, back to kind of that concept of who do you fear, who's your audience. There's consequences, and I think those consequences are becoming more significant to stand for truth. And so I'm fortunate. I got to work with you, got to work with Rich Piper. I mean, many godly men, if you think about the people that we've been blessed to work with over the years.
We really have. We've had a unique walk.
And so I've gotten to see that modeled out in the workplace, whether it was, in the four walls of our company or out, at a client site. There's all sorts of opportunities to kind of fall prey to the temptations and maybe a little fib here, a little fib there. But the moral man stays true, right, to who they want to be, the character that God's called them to.
But it's hard with the temptations that are out in the world. But you're right, we do deceive ourselves by the smallness of our compromises. And it's just a small compromise here. And not only does that lead to a greater compromise personally, but there are a lot of people watching. I remember whether it's my young girls, as a father, or when I was leading people at work, a small misstep or a compromise would impact so many other people. Reflect on your time, whether it's at work or with your family, where you've seen either a leader slip up or, maybe you've had a small compromise and kind of the impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think, naturally, I think of my role at home, right? My greatest mission field being my wife and my kids.
Amen.
And
yeah.
I'm prone to mistakes early and often, and that's why one of the things that drives me to get on my knees every morning is I just am grateful, for God's mercy and for His unfailing love, as He talks about in Psalm 90. The role of father, the role of being a godly husband, is a high calling, and I certainly don't live up to that always. And when I know that I've slipped up and I have to go to my wife or to my kids and ask for forgiveness, maybe I didn't handle myself well in a certain situation, especially these days with us working at home. Sometimes you get into tense moments, and those are difficult times because going back and showing some humility with your kids or your wife is a difficult thing to do, but it's what God calls us to do. And I think it's important that Carrie and the kids see that, hey, it's okay to make mistakes, but let's, as God is merciful with us, let's also be merciful with each other and show each other grace.
Yeah, I think that can be a real powerful moment, either in a marriage, as a parent, or even in the workplace. When we do mess up, which we will, is just to be meek. And the definition of meek is strength under control. And just have that strength under control and apologize and do it authentically. It's a powerful moment. I know it has been in my family, and I've had way too often the ability to exercise that gift, but.
Well, I think you brought up a great point as it relates to the workplace. I think the hard thing about doing that in the workplace is oftentimes we get too focused on what the response is going to be, and we have to recognize that ultimately, we're living to the audience of one, and where we've made mistakes or we need to step out and ask for forgiveness. And I've, like I said, certainly had plenty of those moments. There are going to be times where people don't receive that well, and there's going to be times where they view you as weak, and maybe they view you as, the person who's at fault. When really what you're trying to do is show show a little bit of grace and accept the fact that, you haven't been perfect. But people take advantage of that at times. And I think as a moral leader, you got to be willing to accept that that's okay, right? When you ask for somebody's forgiveness, whether they forgive you or not is kind of on them. But a moral leader does the right thing regardless because they play to an audience of one.
Exactly. And you're okay if you do get taken advantage by doing the right thing. Blessed are those that are persecuted for righteousness' sake.
And you're okay with the consequence of what do they say when you leave the room, right? Are you the one that gets mocked or that they make fun of, or are you okay with that?
Be strong enough to take it. Now, one of the things that I think a priest who's at the top of their game can help call out God's speaking voice, because God is constantly communicating. It's in the essence of who He is God is constantly speaking. His glory is manifest all around us. Mm-hmm. And, a priest calls out and will highlight where God is doing good work or God's speaking voice. Yeah. So have you seen, or where have you done it, or where have you seen other moral leaders really do a good job from that perspective?
Well, I'll speak to the first thing because this is very fresh in my mind, and it's not always. I think it's not always during times of achievement or success or proud moments. I mean, there's difficulties and sufferings that we experience in this world too. And my family just went through this weekend. We lost our dog, and our dog was.
Sorry, buddy.
Thank you. 4-year-old Manny. Unfortunately,
great name for a dog, by the way.
Yeah. We didn't make it up. Actually, we adopted this dog. We rescued him.
Whoever named
and his name was Manny, and we kept
name.
trying to change it, but it never nothing ever seemed to stand up to the high standard of Manny. His real name was Manny Man-Mans, if you want to know.
Okay.
But he snuck out of the house, and we don't know how, and it doesn't matter. But he unfortunately was hit by a neighbor, and he died. And my neighbor feels terrible. Nothing she could have done to prevent it. The dog darted in front of the car, but she came over yesterday and she gave me a basket, for the family, and wrote a nice letter. And I had an opportunity to share with her in that moment that, number one, we're praying for you. We know that this wasn't something that that you could have prevented. Mm-hmm. It was an accident, and we are praying for you and hope that God restores you and gives you some peace. And secondly, it says that in John 10:10, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full.
Right.
That's what Christ tells us. And to experience fullness in this life requires loss, mm-hmm. right? Because what precedes loss is love. And it wouldn't be a loss if you didn't experience that love. So I think moments like that where they're very, very difficult, and we're still processing this as a family, but those moments that God shows up and you have an opportunity to share some hope and share the gospel with somebody, in this case, my neighbor, I think you need to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that shows great compassion, and also just stepping into a hurt, but pointing people to a hope beyond the hurt. One of the things by spending time in God's Word is we become saturated in God's promises, and they become more real to us than the promises of the world. So, your time in the morning, the discipline that you're showing is going to pay dividends at times like that, because we have a hope that doesn't reside in this world, like Ecclesiastes 3:11 mm-hmm. talks about that God places eternity in all of our hearts. So you have a chance to call that out. I think that great example.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I pray for in the morning is, God, give me 2 or 3 people today that I can be the love of Christ, that I can share the gospel with, that I can pray with. And I just find that when you pray for that in the morning and you're intentional about it, mm-hmm. God is going to bring those opportunities to you, right? So back to the comment on the workplace and how to show leadership and be consistent there. It's the difference between saying to somebody, "Hey, Dean, I'll keep you in my prayers. I'm sorry to hear that," versus, "Hey, bud, can you come in and why don't I pray for you right now?" Mm-hmm. And taking that initiative to kind of show love and show respect and not be afraid of what the consequences are, mm-hmm. I think is authentic Christian living, and I think we're all called to do that.
Amen. That's so good. Yes, one of the things that as a priest that I've tried to lean on is trying to find those moments where I can help people see and savor the glory of God. And creational theology, that's been big for me, is God is speaking throughout his creation, just like Psalm 19 talks about. And if you see a beautiful sunrise, instead of just pointing that it's a beautiful sunrise, you can call out that God made that beautiful for a reason. What does that tell us about God? So creational theology has been a big thing for me because it's a way I can help tune people to that speaking voice. You know, I think it's like the radio waves. They're buzzing all around the room, but unless we have the radio tuned to that frequency, we miss it.
Yeah.
And I think so often, because we're so busy in today's culture, that we go right by some of those moments where God's speaking. So time in Scripture has really helped me help tune other people to God's glory.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Psalm 19, the skies declare the glory of the Lord and you know, proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech, and night after night, they display knowledge. There's no language where that's not understood. And so for everybody, you want to know that God is there, just look up. You know, just look around, take in, go watch, you know, the birth of a child. I mean, when I saw my first son born, it was one of the closest moments I've ever felt to God, because I saw creation. You know, as you're speaking of, I saw it in a way I'd never appreciated before. I'd never been a father before, right? And you look at just the glory of God's creation and how his word speaks to that. And I don't know how you can deny that he is right there, he's present, and he's seeking us, right? He's seeking all of us.
Yeah,
we're all without excuse,
right.
it says in Romans 1:20.
Yeah, and a moral leader helps call those things out, whether it's within creation or the circumstances of their life. I remember that when my dad was dying, he died of cancer. And I was in the room when he got that verdict. And when he heard the diagnosis that it was terminal, he bowed his head, then he pulled his head back and said, if that's God's will, I accept it. And now I need to evidence the hope that's within me on this last walk.
Yeah, that's amazing faith. It's great.
Absolutely. And he helped me have a hope that transcends creation. And that's what a moral leader does. He points not only to God speaking here, but those promises of the gospel of the kingdom and Jesus making all things new as the King reigns.
Amen.
And a moral leader can do that.
Right. We had an opportunity as a family. So after Manny was hit, you know, that morning we talked about loss and why God allows that. And we talked about that very thing. One of the questions my kid asks is, are we going to see Manny in heaven? And, you know, one of the things that I pointed out is you were referring to Romans, or I think that's Revelations 21:5, that says, I will make all things new. I will wipe away tears. So before the Lord, there will be no loss. There will be no despair.
Praise God.
It's gonna be, you know, the glory of the Lord. It's gonna be joyful. It's gonna be what he ultimately, you know, created for us to enjoy. That will be where we're really at home. And but I think the moral leader looks at opportunities to let God's light shine. It's not just when things are going well. In fact, oftentimes in the sufferings is when the greatest opportunities are to really present, you know, what God is doing and why he's allowing this. It ultimately, we know from the book of James, produces steadfastness and perseverance and character. And I was blessed with a godly father. I've been blessed with godly mentors like yourself and Rich and others. And they've shown me this and they've exhibited it. And they've done it in the workplace and they've done it in their homes. This is not the first loss that my kids are going to experience. We talked about that. This is going to prepare you for later in life, because this isn't the first time that you're going to go through this, right? God allows us to experience great, wonderful times of blessing, and he allows us to experience loss and tragedy. And that's life to the full. That's what John 10:10 is talking about.
Yeah. Well, Shay, I really appreciate you spending some time and just helping us to see better what a priest looks like in everybody's personal mission field, because right now there's so many people are broadcasting truth, but it's coming from places that don't have the ultimate truth. So we need moral leaders that really step up, whether it's in the home, whether it's in the business place, whether it's out in the market or just traveling wherever you may go every day. We need moral leaders that help people see and savor the glory of God. So I really appreciate it, Shay.
Amen. Thanks for having me, Dino.
You bet.